On a clear afternoon in Ahmedabad, Air India Flight 171 was lining up for a routine 9-hour jump to London. The weather was optimal, the crew had thousands of hours on the Boeing 787, and with 230 passengers and heavy fuel on board, the aircraft was operating right at its performance limits. As the aircraft roared down the runway, the crew executed every procedure flawlessly. They hit their designated speeds, rotated the nose, and lifted off exactly as planned. But the moment the aircraft crossed the airport perimeter wall, the climb abruptly stopped. The plane began to lose altitude, banking sharply to the left. What followed was a catastrophic sequence lasting just 2.5 seconds. The nose gear clipped a brick incinerator chimney, tearing away instantly. The fuselage then plowed through an adjacent medical college, shearing off both wings and the tail section against the concrete buildings, before erupting in a massive explosion. The destruction of a functional Dreamliner in under 3 seconds prompted an immediate investigation. However, when we reconstructed the flight path frame by frame, we found a series of discrepancies between the official report and the physical reality of the crash. The official report's official timeline states that the aircraft reached a maximum speed of 180 knots, and immediately after hitting that speed, the dual-engine fuel cutoff switches were activated in the cockpit. But independent 3D tracking of the flight path reveals a contradiction. This line graph plots the plane's airspeed over time. If we look closely at the data past the official cutoff timestamp, the plane's indicated airspeed didn't drop. It actually continued to climb for 5 full seconds, accelerating by another 16 knots. Inside a jet engine, once the fuel is cut, thrust collapses almost instantly. As we overlay engine thrust onto this chart, you can see power dropping vertically to 0 at the exact moment the airspeed is still climbing. A 200-ton aircraft cannot propel itself upward and accelerate without any engine power. Momentum alone cannot explain a 5-second, 16-knot acceleration phase. This physical data suggests the sequence of events recorded in the official report is flawed. Because the plane could not have accelerated without thrust, solving this mystery requires us to look past the official timeline and prove exactly how and why those switches moved in the cockpit. To find the source of the shutdown, we have to test 4 distinct theories, beginning with a natural engine flameout, where the engines simply died on their own. We can test that by looking at how the Boeing 787 records data. Think of it like a car ignition. If your car runs out of gas, the computer records that the engine died, but it doesn't say you turn the key. This flowchart shows the aircraft's RDC data system, a single isolated data line running straight from the physical switch to the flight recorder. The black box from Flight 171 explicitly logged the switches moving to the cutoff position. That mechanical reading proves the engines didn't fail on their own. The switches were physically moved. The third theory involves an autonomous override. The 787 has safety software called TCMA, designed to automatically shut down an engine if it detects a dangerous malfunction. However, looking at this schematic of the cockpit fuel switch wiring, we can see the electrical limitations. There is a data output line, but there are absolutely 0 inbound data connections. The plane's computer has no physical way to mechanically move those switches. A TCMA activation closes high-pressure valves deep inside the engine that require ground maintenance to reset. Yet the flight data shows the engines on Air India 171 actually attempted a restart while still in the air. With natural mechanical failure and autonomous software overrides both proven to be impossible, the evidence indicates that the shutdown was triggered by physical human action inside the cockpit. This leads to our next theory. One of the pilots accidentally bumped the switches during the heavy vibrations of the takeoff roll. Boeing specifically engineered the center console to prevent this. This technical illustration shows the 3 layers of defense around these switches. They are heavily spring-loaded, requiring a firm pinch and pull. They are surrounded by raised physical guards and sit against mechanical stops at their base. Bumping one switch past all 3 of those safeguards by mistake would be difficult. Accidentally bypassing the springs, guards, and stops on both switches simultaneously within a single second is statistically and physically improbable. This leaves intentional manual action as the only remaining explanation. Human hands are the only mechanism physically capable of pulling both switches in that time frame. Whether driven by a catastrophic lapse in cognition or a moment of panic, a pilot manually killed the engines at the most dangerous possible moment, sealing the fate of the flight. Solving the mystery of the switches only tells half the story. The investigation into the wreckage revealed a second layer of failure regarding the aircraft's own survival systems. This wireframe shows the aircraft's crucial recovery tools: the forward black box, the rear black box, and the emergency locator transmitter, or ELT. Despite this being a relatively low-speed impact, the rear data units were destroyed by thermal heat, and the ELT failed to activate. These devices have one job: to survive extreme crash forces. Seeing them fail in a low-speed, low-altitude collision raises serious questions about the manufacturing integrity of these safety tools. And the problems extended to the investigators themselves. When the forward black box was recovered, the local aviation authority lacked a golden chassis, a basic, mandatory piece of testing equipment. This forced them to halt their work and import hardware from the United States. The investigation of Flight 171 reveals a series of failed layers: an official timeline at odds with basic physics, cockpit safeguards that didn't stop a manual shutdown, and safety hardware that failed to survive the very impact it was designed for.